Hello, geometry students. We are going to review a few proofs here. So hopefully you already have these done. And so we're just going to correct them and make sure that you get all of your questions answered here by me going through them for you. So you can see I already have this set up with your statement and your reason and your given information in here. All right, so there is a reason that they are giving us PQ is bisecting angle SPT. Why did they tell us that PQ is going to bisect this angle? Well, the reason they tell us that is they want us to be able to conclude that angle SPQ is congruent to angle TPQ. And why can we say that? TPQ. The reason we can say that is because this is a definition of angle bisector. Anytime you have an angle bisector, then it is going to divide that angle into two equal parts. So now we have a side and an angle congruent. Is there anything else that we can get congruent in here? And another thing that we can say in here is that PQ is congruent to PQ. And what's the reason we can say that? Because that is the reflexive property of equality. So now we can get this side congruent to itself. So now it looks like we've got side, angle, side as the reason here as to why triangle SPQ is congruent to triangle TPQ. All right, so we need to get three things congruent here. All right, next proof. So they're giving us a figure here and they're telling us AB is congruent to CD. AB is congruent to CD, so we have that marked. And then they're telling us that AB is parallel to CD. And as you look here, we have a transversal going from A to C. And that transversal between those two parallel lines is making angle 1 congruent to angle 2. Why can we say angle 1 is congruent to angle 2? Because if we have two parallel lines cut by a transversal, then alternate interior angles are congruent. So now we have this angle congruent to this angle, so we have two things. So what else do we need to get these two triangles congruent? And we can say that AC is congruent to AC because of the reflexive property. So now we have this is congruent to itself. So now we can say triangle ABC is congruent to triangle CDA. And the reason we can say that is because we have side, angle, side. So that angle is included between those two sides. All right, our next proof here. So a lot of times in diagrams, I like when they're not marked ahead of time, but this one already went ahead and marked it. So they're telling us that C is the midpoint of AE. So when we look at AE, they're telling us that C is the midpoint. So what can we conclude from that is that now that AC is going to be congruent to CE. So AC is congruent to CE, and why can we say that? Because that is the definition of a midpoint. So a midpoint is going to cut something into two equal pieces. Now at the same time, it also says that it is the midpoint of this BD. So we can also say that BC is congruent to CD, and that's also because of the definition of midpoint. Now, some people write those on separate lines and would call that step 3. You can put it in the same line because it is the same reason, or you can write it as a separate line. All right, so what else here are we going to get for our third step here? We've got no congruent segments, no reflexive going on here, but what else do we have here? So if we talk about this angle and this angle, are those two angles congruent? So ACB, is that congruent to angle DCE? And that answer is yes. And do you remember the reason here that we can say that? And they are called vertical angles. So we can get those congruent because they are vertical. So now can we say triangle ABC is congruent to triangle EDC? And we can say that because we have side, angle, side, that included angle. All right, one more proof here before you guys are going to get ready for the next step here. All right, step 2. Again, they gave us PT congruent and Q's congruent. So now what do we have? Well, we got PQT. So make sure you're focused on the right triangle here, the correct triangle. And we can say angle PTQ is congruent to angle STR. And these two angles are congruent by that same reason that we just used last time, and that they are vertical angles here. So vertical angles are congruent. So now we have this angle congruent to that one. So this one's going to be a short one. We can get these two triangles congruent. PQT is congruent to triangle RST because of side, angle, side. So this will end up only being 2 steps. The biggest thing in here is to make sure you get the correct triangles congruent, because some people accidentally don't pay attention and they get this angle congruent to that angle, which they are, but you have to make sure you get the correct angles in there to get your triangles congruent. All right. That should bring us to the end of our 4 proofs here. So hope everything went well for you and we answered all of your questions.